beyond the mind.
超越心灵。
At the end of the day, everything arises within your consciousness. You've nowhere else to experience it.
到头来，一切都在你的意识中发生，你没有其他地方可以体验它。
That consciousness is relatively static in a sense that it's been exactly the same from the moment you were born to the moment you die. Everything that you experience, from your body, your mind to the world to everything, is within that consciousness. And that thing, that base layer of being, and this is what the Buddhists will tell you, is the real thing.
在某种意义上，意识是相对静止的，从你出生到死亡始终如一，你从身体、心灵到外在世界所经历的一切都在这个意识里，而这个存在的基底佛教徒会告诉你才是真实的。
Everything that comes and goes in the middle, including your mind, including your body, is unreal, and trying to find stability in those transient things is your castle that you're building on sand that's going to crumble.
在过程中来来去去的一切，包括你的心念与身体，都是不真实的。若试图在这些短暂的事物上寻找稳定，就像在沙地上建造城堡，终将崩塌。
Life is going to play out the way it's going to play out. There will be some good and some bad. Most of it is actually just up to your interpretation. You're born, you have a set of sensory experiences, and then you die. How you choose to interpret those experiences is up to you, and different people interpret them in different ways.
人生会按照它的方式展开，会有好也会有坏，但大部分其实取决于你的解读。你出生，拥有一系列感官经验，然后死亡，你如何解释这些经验取决于自己，而不同的人会用不同的方式去诠释。
It's the old line about two people walking down the street. They are having the exact same experience. One is happy, one is sad, right? It's a narrative in their heads. It's how they choose to interpret.
就像老话说的，两个人一起走在街上，经历完全相同，但一个快乐，一个悲伤，这全是脑中的叙事，是他们选择如何解读。
So I think when I said that it was a long time ago, I was talking more about having positive interpretations and negative interpretations. But these days I think it's better just not to have any interpretations, and to just allow things to be.
我以前谈论的可能更多是正面或负面的解读，但如今我认为最好不要有任何解读，只是让事情如其所是。
You're still going to have interpretations. You can't stop it, and nor should you try. But even that having an interpretation is just a thing you can leave alone.
你仍然会有解读，这是无法阻止的，也不该强行阻止。但就算有了解读，你也可以选择不去理会它。
Valuing your time.
珍惜你的时间。
I really want to try and just dig in a little more to the best way to remind people that they should value their time, just how brief it is, that the time that you spend ruminating, being distracted, fears of the past, regrets.
我想更深入地提醒人们要珍惜自己的时间，因为它是如此短暂。那些花在反刍、分心、恐惧过去或懊悔上的时间。
I don't want to tell anybody how to live their life. I would just say that to the extent that you want to improve your quality of life, the easiest and best way to do that is to observe your own mind and your own thoughts and be a little more observant of yourself objectively. Then you'll kind of realize your own loops and patterns. It takes time, it's not overnight, it's not instantaneous.
我不想告诉任何人该如何过日子，我只想说，如果你希望改善生活品质，最简单也最有效的方法就是观察自己的心念与思维，客观地审视自己，这样你会逐渐看清自己的回圈与模式。这需要时间，并非一夕之间能完成。
So you mean letting go is not a one-time event?
所以你的意思是，放下并不是一次性的事件。
Yeah, and letting go is not necessarily even the right answer. If you're trying to be an enlightened being, and you want to live like a god, and everything's going to be perfect and be a Buddha, sure you can let go. But I think in practice it's actually quite hard to do.
是的，而且放下甚至不一定是正确的答案。如果你追求成为一个开悟的人，想要像神一样生活，一切圆满如佛，那么放下或许是一条路，但我认为实际上相当困难。
I think you're going to find a lot of fulfillment out of life by just doing what you want to do and genuinely exploring what it is that you want rather than doing what other people expect you to do or society expects you to do or what you might just think should be done by default. I think most older successful people will tell you that their life was best when they lived it unapologetically on their own terms.
我认为你若真心去做自己想做的事，探索自己真正渴望的是什么，而不是照着别人的期待、社会的标准，或只是依循应该的默认路径，你会从人生中获得更多的满足。我相信大多数年长且成功的人都会告诉你，他们最美好的时光是无愧于心地按照自己方式生活的时候。
Trusting your gut versus your head.
信任直觉与理智。
I had this insight. Question, I guess. How much do you think that we should trust the voice in our heads? Because half of wisdom suggests to rely on your sort of bottom-up intuition, and then half of it has to be sort of top-down rational as possible. How do you navigate the tension between head and gut in this way?
我有个领悟，也算是一个问题吧。你认为我们该多大程度上相信脑海中的声音？因为智慧的一半告诉我们要依靠自下而上的直觉，而另一半则强调要自上而下地理性思考。那么在头脑与直觉的张力之间，你如何拿捏？
I think the gut is what decides. The head is kind of what rationalizes it afterwards. The gut is the ultimate decision maker. And what is the gut? The gut is refined judgment. It's taste, aggregated. It could be aggregated through evolution, in your genes and your DNA, or it could be aggregated through your experiences and what you've thought through.
我认为决定的是直觉，头脑只是事后加以合理化，直觉才是最终的决策者。而直觉是什么？直觉是经过提炼的判断，是一种累积的品味，它可能来自进化，写在你的基因与 DNA 中。或来自你的人生经验与思考的累积。
The mind is good at solving new problems in the external world that have defined edges, beginnings and ends and objectives. What the mind is actually really bad at is making hard decisions. So when you have a hard decision to make, I find it's better to ruminate on it, think through all the pros and cons, but then you sleep on it. You wait a couple of days.You wait until the gut answer appears with conviction and it feels right.
头脑擅长解决新的问题，那些有清楚边界、有开始与结束并有明确目标的外在问题，但头脑真正不擅长的是做出困难的抉择。所以当你面临艰难的决定时，我认为最好是反复思考利弊，然后先放下，睡一觉，等上几天，直到那个充满信心且感觉正确的直觉答案浮现出来。
When you're younger, it takes longer because you just don't have as much experience, and when you're older, it can happen much faster, which is why old people are more set in their ways as a consequence. They know what they want, they know what they don't want.
年轻时需要更长的时间，因为缺乏足够的经验，而年纪大了，这过程会更快。这也是为什么老年人更固执己见，他们清楚知道自己要什么，不要什么。
So it takes time to develop your gut instinct and judgment. But once you've developed them, don't trust anything else because you can't go against your gut. It'll bite you in the end.
因此，发展直觉和判断需要时间，但一旦养成，就不要违背它，因为你无法与直觉对抗，最终会反噬自己。
Relationships and personal growth.
关系与个人成长。
Usually in relationships that failed, you can look back and say, oh, actually, I knew it was going to fail because of this reason. But I kind of went ahead anyway because I wanted it to be this way, right? I wanted this person to be a different way than they are. Or I wanted to get a different thing out of it than I thought I was going to, than I knew I was going to get. But I just wanted it. So sometimes desire will override your judgment.
通常在失败的关系里，你回头看会发现，其实我早就知道他会失败，因为某些原因，但我仍然选择继续，因为我想要他照我的方式发展。我希望这个人能成为我想要的样子，或者得到我明知道得不到的东西，但我就是想要，所以有时欲望会凌驾于判断之上。
Wistful thinking. It traps you into a pathway that just chews up time.
一厢情愿的想法会把你困在一条消耗时间的道路上。
What's that insight of yours?
那么， 你的见解是什么？
Think we can't change ourselves, but we can. We think we can change other people, but we can't.
我们以为自己无法改变，但其实可以。我们以为能改变他人，但其实不能。
Exactly.
没错，
I think to add to that, you can't change other people, you can change your reaction to them, you can change yourself, but other people only change through trauma or their own insight on their own schedule and never in a way that you like.
我想补充的是，你不能改变别人，你能改变的是你对他们的反应。你能改变的是自己，但别人只有在经历创伤或自我领悟时，才会依照他们自己的节奏去改变，而且绝不会是你所期待的方式。
Al-Anon teaches that people do sometimes change, but rarely in relationships and never when they're told to. Al-Anon.
匿名戒瘾亲属团体告诉我们，人有时会改变，但几乎不会在关系中改变，更不会因为被要求而改变。
Absolutely. The fastest way to alienate somebody is to tell them to change.
完全正确。疏远一个人最快的方法，就是告诉他要改变。
Learning without pressure.
无压力的学习。
In fact, the Dale Carnegie School of Public Speaking operates by getting you up there and realizing that the number one problem with public speaking is that people are very self-conscious. People who are practicing in the Dale Carnegie School of Public Speaking start speaking and the people in the audience are only allowed to compliment them, genuine compliments, not fake compliments, on things that they did well. You're not allowed to criticize them on things that they did poorly and eventually they develop self-confidence.
事实上，戴尔·卡内基演讲学校的做法就是让你站上台，然后意识到公开演讲的最大问题是人们太过自我意识。在那里练习的人开始演讲时，观众只允许对他们做得好的地方给予真诚的赞美，而不能批评他们做得不好的地方。最终，他们就会建立起自信。
The same way, there's the Michelle Thomas School of Language Learning. What they do is you listen to a teacher talking to a student. They are not teaching you. You're not expected to remember or memorize anything. You just listen to a student stumbling over the language. It's a better way to learn because you yourself don't feel flustered or tested or graded. You're not in your own head as much.
同样的，米歇尔·托马斯语言学校的方式是，你听老师与学生的对话，他们不是直接教你，你也不需要记忆或背诵，你只是听学生在语言上跌跌撞撞。这是一种更好的学习方式，因为你自己不会感到慌张，被测验或被评分，你不会一直困在自己的脑袋里。
Correct. You're not in your own head and you're just observing. You might even be laughing at the student or agreeing with the teacher or sympathizing with the student, but because you are a passive observer you can be more objective about it. You aren't threatened or fearful and you can learn better.
没错，你不再困于自己的脑海，而只是观察。你可能会笑那个学生，同意老师，或者同情学生，但因为你是被动的观察者，所以能更客观地看待，你不会受到威胁或恐惧，因此能学得更好。
Coming back to the original point of you can't change people, if you do want to change someone's behavior, I think the only effective way to do it is to compliment them when they do something you want.
回到最初的观点，你无法改变别人。如果你真的想改变某人的行为，我认为唯一有效的方法就是在他们做出你希望的行为时给予赞美 （positive reinforcement）， 正向强化 （positive reinforcement）， 正向强化。
Yeah, exactly. Not to insult them or be negative or critical when they do something you don't want. We can't help it. It's obviously in our nature to criticize, and I do it as well. But it reminds me that when somebody does something praiseworthy, don't forget to praise them. Definitely go out of your way, and it'll be genuine. It has to be genuine. It can't be fake. People want authenticity, but just don't forget to praise people when they do something praiseworthy, and you'll get more of that behavior.
是的，没错。当别人做了你不希望的事时，不要侮辱、否定或批评他们。我们往往忍不住这么做，因为批评是人的天性。我自己也会，但我提醒自己，当有人做了值得称赞的事，不要忘记赞美他们，务必要特意去做，而且要真诚，必须是真心的，不能虚假。人们渴望真诚，所以当有人做了值得称赞的事时，不要忘记去赞美。 你会得到更多这样的行为。
Relationship clarity.
关系的清晰度。
There was a really famous thread on Reddit about 5 questions to ask yourself if you're uncertain about your relationship. One of the questions was, are you truly in love with your partner or just their potential or the idea of them? That's the they show such great promise thinking. They look at their ability for change and growth. They are on the right path. Reddit.
上有一个非常有名的讨论串，谈到当你对自己的关系不确定时，可以问自己5个问题，其中一个是：你是真正爱上了你的伴侣，还是只是爱上了他们的潜力或对他们的想象？这就是他们很有潜力的思维，着眼于他们的改变与成长能力，好像他们走在正确的道路上。
The partner matching thing is so hard. When people come and ask me, should I be with this person? Well, if you're asking me, the answer is clearly no, right? Because you wouldn't have to ask if you were with the right person. Or when you ask someone why they're in a relationship with somebody and they start reading out his or her resume, that's also a bad sign.
找到合适的伴侣真的很难。当有人来问我，我应该和这个人在一起吗？我的回答通常是，如果你需要问，那答案大概率就是不，因为当你和对的人在一起时，你根本不需要问。或者，如果有人被问到为什么和某人在一起，而他开始背对方的履历，这也是一个坏兆头。
What do you mean?
你是什么意思？
It's like, oh, we have so much in common. We like to golf together. That's not a basis for a relationship. Or, oh, you know, she's a ballerina. Or he went to Harvard. These are resume items, not who the person actually is.
例如，我们有很多共同点，我们都喜欢打高尔夫，这不是一段关系的基础。或者他是芭蕾舞者，或他是哈佛毕业生，这些都是履历上的项目，而不是这个人真正的本质。
What's a better answer?
那么，什么是更好的答案？
I just love being with this person. I just trust them. I enjoy being around them. I love how capable he is. I love how kind she is. I love her spirit. I love his energy.
我就是喜欢和这个人在一起，我信任他，我享受与他相处，我喜欢他的能力，我喜欢他的善良，我爱他的精神，我爱他的能量。
The more materially and concretely definable the reasons are you're together, the worse they are. The ineffable is actually where the true love lies.
你和某人在一起的理由越物质化，越具体，反而越糟。真正的爱其实存在于那些难以言喻的地方。
Because real love is a form of unity. It's a form of connection. It's connecting spirit. My consciousness meets your consciousness. The underlying drive in love, in art, in science, in mysticism, is the desire for unity. It's the desire for connection.
因为真正的爱是一种合一，是一种连结，是精神上的契合。我的意识遇见你的意识，爱、艺术、科学与神秘主义背后的驱动力。都是对合一与连结的渴望。
As Borges famously wrote, in every human there's a sense that something infinite has been lost. There's a God-shaped hole in you you're trying to fill, and so we're always trying to find that connection. Love is trying to find it in one other person and saying, you're male, I'm female, or whatever your predilections are, and now we connect. Now we form a whole, a connected whole.
正如博尔赫斯所言，每个人内心都有一种失落了无限的感觉，你心中有一个上帝形状的空洞，试图填补。因此我们总在寻找连结，爱就是试图在另一个人身上找到它，然后说，你是男性，我是女性，或任何其他倾向。现在我们连结了，形成了一个完整的整体。
In mysticism, it's about sitting down to meditate and feeling the whole. In science, it's like atoms bouncing is mechanics, but that generates heat. So thermodynamics and motion or kinetics are one combined theory, that's a whole. Electricity and magnetism are one thing, that's the whole, creates that sense of awe.
在神秘主义中，是坐下冥想并感受整体。在科学中，原子的碰撞属于力学，但它产生热量，于是热力学与动能学合并成一个理论，那是一个整体，电与磁是一体的。这种合一带来了敬畏之感。
In art, I feel an emotion. I create a piece of art around it, and then you see that painting, or you see the Sistine Chapel, or you read the poem, and you feel that emotion. So again it's creating unity. it's creating connection. I think everybody craves that. And so when you really love somebody, it's because you feel a sense of wholeness by being around them, and that sense of wholeness probably doesn't have anything to do with what school they went to or what career they are in.
在艺术中，我感受到一种情感，创作出一件作品围绕它。你看到那幅画，看到西斯汀教堂，或读到那首诗时，也感受到那份情感。所以这同样是创造和一与连结。我想每个人都渴望这样的经验。因此，当你真正爱一个人时，是因为与他们在一起让你感到完整，而这份完整与他们读过哪所学校或从事什么职业毫无关联。
Just tying that into life is short. If you're faced with a difficult choice, and you cannot decide, the answer is no. The reason is modern society is full of options.
把这和人生苦短连接起来，如果你面临艰难选择却无法决定，答案就是不，因为现代社会充满了各种选项。
Decision-making principles.
决策原则。
Knowing this rationally sounds great, but having the courage to commit to it in reality is a different task. Cutting your losses quickly in the big three, relationships, jobs, and locations, is hard. What would you say to someone who may cerebrally be able to agree with you?
理性上明白这一点听起来很好，但在现实中有勇气去执行却是另一回事。在三大领域关系、工作和居住地中快速止损很难。对于那些理智上同意你却难以做到的人，你会怎么说？
My cousin said this about me. He said, "What I really noticed about you is your ability to walk away from situations that are just not great enough for you or not good enough for you. And I think that is a characteristic that I have."
我的表弟曾经这样评价我。我注意到你的一点是，你能够从那些不够好的、不适合你的情境中抽身离开。我觉得这确实是我的一个特点。
I will not accept second best outcomes in my life. Ultimately, you will end up wherever is acceptable to you. You will get out of life whatever is acceptable to you.
我不会接受人生中的次等结果，最终你会停留在你认为可接受的地方。人生会给你与你标准相符的结果。
There are certain things to me that are very important where I will not settle for second best, but then there are a lot of other things I just don't care about. If I spend all my time caring about those things, I don't have the energy for the few things that matter.
对我而言，有些事情非常重要，我不会将就。但还有许多其他事情我根本不在乎。如果我把所有精力都放在那些无关紧要的事上，就没有能量去专注在真正重要的少数事情上。
In decision making, I have a few heuristics for myself. Other people can use their own, but mine are.
在决策时，我有几个属于自己的准则，其他人可以有自己的，但对我而言是。
If you can't decide, the answer is no. If you're offered an opportunity, if you have a new thing that you're saying yes or no to that is a change from where you're starting, the answer is by default always no.
如果你无法决定，那答案就是不。如果有人给你一个机会，如果有一件新事需要你回答要不要，而它会改变现状，那么预设答案永远是否定的。
If you have two decisions, A or B, and both seem very equal, take the path that's more painful in the short term, the one that's going to be painful immediately, because your brain is always trying to avoid pain. Any pain that is imminent, it is going to treat as much larger than it actually is.
如果你有两个选项 A 和 B， 看起来都差不多，那就选择短期内更痛苦的那个，因为大脑总是试图逃避痛苦，任何迫在眉睫的痛苦，大脑都会把它放大的比实际大得多。
This is kind of like a decision-making equivalent of a Taleb surgeon. The surgeon that doesn't look as good because he's more likely to be a good surgeon.
这有点像塔雷布讲的外科医生的例子，外表看起来不怎么样的医生，反而更可能是好医生。
Yeah, it's similar in that appearances are deceiving because you're avoiding conflict. You're avoiding pain. So take the path that's more painful in the short term because your brain has created this illusion that the short-term pain is greater than the long-term pain.
是的，这很相似，因为表象会欺骗你，大脑会让你避免冲突，避免痛苦，所以要选择短期内更痛苦的道路，因为你的大脑创造了一种错觉，让你觉得短期痛苦比长期痛苦更大。
Because long-term, you'll commit your future self to all kinds of long-term pain.
因为长期来看，你会把未来的自己推向各种长期的痛苦。
Mañana, exactly.
明天吧，明天再说。没错，就是这样。
Take the choice that will leave you more equanimous in the long term, more mental peace in the long term. Whatever clears your mind more and will have you having less self-talk in the future, if you can model that out, that is probably the better route to go.
选择能让你长期更平静、更安宁的路，无论哪个选项能让你的心更清明，能让未来减少内心自我对话，那大概就是更好的选择。
The 3 key life decisions.
人生3大关键决策，
I would focus decision making down on the 3 things that really matter, because everything else is downstream of these 3 decisions, especially early in life. Later in life you have different things to optimize for, but early in life you're trying to figure out who you're with, what you're doing, and where you live.
我会把决策聚焦在3件真正重要的事，因为其他一切都是这3个决定的衍生。特别是在年轻的时候，随着人生后期，你会有不同的优化目标，但在早期，重点是要弄清楚你和谁在一起，你在做什么，你住在哪里。
I think on all 3 of those, you want to think pretty hard about it. People do some of these unconsciously. With who you're with, very often it's like, we were in a relationship. We stumbled along, it felt okay. It had been enough time, so we got married.
我认为这3件事都需要你非常认真的思考。许多人是无意识地做出这些决定，比如我们在交往，就这样一路走下来，感觉还可以，时间也差不多了，所以我们就结婚了。
Not great reasons.
这不是好的理由。
Maybe not terrible reasons either. People who overthink these things sometimes don't get the right answer. But maybe here, if you're the kind of person that's not going to settle for second best, you iterate on a closed time frame so you don't run out the clock, and then you decide.
但也不一定是坏理由。有些人对这些事想太多，反而得不到好答案。但或许在这里，如果你是不愿将就的人，可以设定一个封闭的时间框架，不要无限拖延，然后在期限内做决定。
On what you do, you try a whole bunch of different things until you find the one that feels like play to you, looks like work to others. You can't lose at it. Get some leverage, try to find some practical application of it and go into that.
至于工作，你可以尝试许多不同的事情，直到找到一件在你眼里像游戏，在别人眼里像工作，而你又无法输掉的事，然后找到杠杆，找到实际应用的方式，再投入其中。
And then where you live is really important. I don't think people spend enough time on that one. People pick cities randomly based on where they went to school, or where their family happened to be, or where their friend was, or they visited one weekend and really liked it.
然后是居住地，这真的非常重要。我觉得人们对这一点思考的不够。很多人选择城市是随机的，根据他们上学的地方、家人所在、朋友所在，或是某个周末去过一次就喜欢上了。
You really want to think it through. Because where you live really constrains and defines your opportunities. It's going to determine your friend circle, your dating pool, your job opportunities, the food and air and water quality that you receive, your proximity to your family, which might be important as you get older and have kids. Very, very important decision.
你真的要仔细考虑，因为居住的会限制并定义你的机会，它会决定你的朋友圈、恋爱对象、工作机会，甚至决定你获得的食物、空气与水质，还有你和家人的距离。随着年龄增长和有了孩子，这些会愈发重要。这是一个极其重要的决定。
Weather, quality of life, how much you stay inside or outside, how long you'll live based on that. I think people choose that one probably more poorly than the other two. They put a lot less thought into that one.
天气、生活品质，你花多少时间待在室内或户外，甚至寿命都会受到影响。我认为人们在这方面考虑的比前2个还少，反而做得更差。
In some ways, yeah. But also you're so right. How many people fall backward into a relationship, and before they know it, we're living together, we got a dog, we got a kid, we're married.
在某些方面确实如此，而且你说的没错。 有多少人就这样跌跌撞撞进入一段关系，不知不觉间我们住在一起了，我们养了狗，我们有了孩子，我们结婚了。
Yeah, and then when you have kids, because that's half of you and half of them running around, you're never going to separate yourself from that. So once you have a child with somebody, then the most important thing in the world to you is half that other person, whether you like them or not.
是的，然后当你有了孩子，那是你的一半和对方的一半在跑来跑去，你永远不可能与之分开。所以一旦你和某人有了孩子，那么这世界上对你最重要的东西就有一半属于那个人，不管你喜不喜欢他。Nature versus nurture， 先天与后天。
Jeffrey Miller had a tweet a long time ago that I always think about. He said, every parenting book in the world could be replaced with one book on behavioral genetics.
杰佛瑞·米勒很久以前发过一条推文，我一直记得。他说，世上所有的育儿书都可以被一本行为遗传学的书取代。
I am a big believer in genetics. I do think a lot of behavior is downstream of genetics, and I think we underplay that. We like to overplay nurture and underplay nature for societal reasons. But nature is a big deal. The temperament of the person you marry is probably going to be reflected in your child by default.
我非常相信基因，我认为很多行为都是基因的下游结果，而我们低估了这一点。由于社会原因，我们倾向于过度强调后天环境，却忽视先天遗传。但基因其实很重要，你与之结婚的人的性格很可能会自然地反映在你的孩子身上。
People should watch for a securely attached kid. Pick a securely attached partner.
人们应该观察孩子是否有安全依附，同样的，也要选择一个安全依附的伴侣。
Well, the secret to a happy relationship is two happy people, right? So I would say if you want to be happy, then be with a happy person. Don't think you're going to be with someone who's unhappy and then make them happy down the road. Or if you're okay with them being unhappy, but there are other things you like about them, that's fine. But this goes back to conversation. Conversations are unhappiness with other things.
其实幸福关系的秘诀就是两个快乐的人，对吧？所以我会说，如果你想快乐，那就和一个快乐的人在一起，不要以为你能和一个不快乐的人在一起，然后让他以后变快乐。或者，如果你能接受对方的不快乐，但欣赏他其他的特质，那也行。但这又回到我们的对话。对话往往揭示了不快乐与其他东西的纠缠。
The importance of values in relationships.
关系中价值观的重要性。
Yeah, and actually, we talked a little bit about how people do connect successfully on spirit and those things, but that's maybe a little too abstract. If you want to get a little more practical, could be based on values, and values are the set of things you won't compromise on. Values are the tough decisions of, my parent got sick. Do they move in with us or do we put them in nursing home? Do we give the children money or do we not? Do we move across the country to be closer to our family or do we stay put where we are?
是的，我们刚刚谈到人们如何在精神层面建立成功的连结，但那或许太抽象了。如果要更实际，可以回到价值观。价值观是你不愿妥协的东西，比如父母生病了，要不要搬来和我们住？还是送进疗养院？要不要给孩子钱？要不要搬到国家的另一头以便接近家人？还是待在原地？
Do we argue about politics? Do we care or do we not? Right? The values are way more important than checklist items. And I think if people were to align much more on their values, they would have much more successful relationships. The emotional pain of fearing change. I have this thing, the job, the location, the partner. I'm going to enter or not enter this thing, for the most part it's leaving.
我们要不要争论政治？我们在乎还是不在乎，对吧？价值观远比清单上的条件更重要。我认为，如果人们能在价值观上更多的一致，他们会拥有更成功的关系。而那种对改变的恐惧所带来的情感痛苦，无论是工作、居住地或伴侣，要不要进入或退出，大多与离开有关。
I think we have this sort of loss aversion that we really feel. Evolve loss aversion. It's painful separating yourself in front of your friends. It's embarrassing. And how would you advise people to get past themselves with that loss aversion? That fear of change?
我认为我们有一种根深蒂固的损失规避，在人前分开是痛苦的，会觉得丢脸。那么你会如何建议人们克服这种损失规避，这种对改变的恐惧？
Overcoming fear of change.
克服对改变的恐惧。
Oh my god, I'm going to. Yeah, it's the hardest thing in the world, starting over. It's back to the 0 to 1 thing. It's the mountain climbing thing. You're not going to find your path to the top of the mountain in the first go around. Sometimes you go up there, you get stuck, and you come back down. And the difference between all the successful people and the ones who are not, is the ones who are successful want it so badly they're willing to go back and start over, again and again, whether in their career, or in their relationships, or in anything else.
天啊，这真是的，重新开始是世界上最难的事。这又回到从0到1的概念，就像爬山一样，你不可能第一次就找到登顶的路，有时候你会上去，却被卡住然后退回来。而成功者与不成功者的区别在于，成功者渴望的如此强烈，以至于他们愿意一次又一次地重新开始，不管是在事业、感情或其他任何事情上。
The more seriously you take yourself, the unhappier you're going to be.
你越是严肃地看待自己，就会越不快乐。
You learned how to take yourself less seriously?
你学会了怎么不要那么严肃对待自己了吗？
Well, fame doesn't help on that one, because that is one of the traps of fame. People are always talking about you, they have a certain view of you, and you start believing that, and then you take yourself seriously, and then that limits your own actions. You can't look like a fool anymore, you can't do new things anymore. If tomorrow I announce I'm a breakdancer, right, that's going to be met with a lot of scorn and ridicule.
名气对此没有帮助，因为这正是名声的陷阱之一。人们总在谈论你，他们对你有一种固定的看法，而你开始相信那样的形象，于是你把自己看得很严肃，结果限制了自己的行为。你不再能显得像个傻瓜，你不再敢做新事。如果我明天宣布我要当霹雳舞者，那肯定会引来大量的嘲笑与讥讽。
I back you if you want to make that pivot.
如果你真的想转行做这件事，我会支持你。
Yeah, the truth is if I want to be a breakdancer, I'd be breakdancing. But you know, like I'm starting a new company, 0 to 1 again, from scratch. Let's do it, you know, one more time. And not just going and raising a big VC fund or retiring or what have you. But that's because I want to build the product. I want to see it exist.
是啊，事实上，如果我真的想当霹雳舞者，我早就去跳了。但就像我现在要创办一间新公司，又一次从0到1，从头开始，再来一次，而不是只是去筹个大基金或退休。因为我想打造产品，我想看到它存在。
So I think that you constantly just have to force yourself, have to remind yourself, look, deep down, you're still the same Chris you were when you were 9 years old. Deep down, you're still a kid, you know. You're still curious about the world. You still have a lot of the same predilections and desires at once. You've got a nice veneer on it.
所以我认为你必须不断强迫自己，不断提醒自己，看吧，在内心深处，你仍然是9岁时的那个 Chris。内心深处，你仍然是个孩子，你仍然对世界充满好奇，你仍然拥有很多相同的偏好和渴望，只是外面多了一层漂亮的外壳。
But one of the nice things when you have kids is you realize how much closer they are to you in personality and knowledge and know-how. Like I look at my son who's 8 and I just notice like wow he probably has 60 to 80% of my knowledge and development wisdom, and he has a lot more freedom, and he has a lot more spontaneity. In some ways he's smarter, and there's not a big gap here left to close. This kid's going to be done very soon, caught up to me. And so to the extent that I think I know better or that I'm somewhere or that I'm someone, it's just an illusion, it's just a belief.
有了孩子后，你会发现他们在个性与知识上的相似度比你想象的高很多。比如，我看着8岁的儿子，我惊讶地发现，他可能已经拥有我60%到80%的知识与智慧，他拥有更多自由与自发性。在某些方面甚至比我聪明，我们之间剩下的差距其实不大了。这孩子很快就会追上我，所以当我以为自己知道的更多，以为自己是什么人物，那其实只是幻觉。 只是信念。
What's the lineage between that and taking yourself too seriously?
这和不要太严肃看待自己有什么关联？
I shouldn't take myself too seriously because there's nothing here to take that seriously, and if I take myself too seriously then I'm going to get trapped. I'm going to circumscribe myself again into a limited set of behaviors and outcomes that keep me from being free, keep me from being spontaneous, keep me from being happy, so it just goes back to, don't think about yourself too much.
我不应该太严肃对待自己，因为没有什么值得如此严肃。如果我太严肃对待自己，就会被困住，把自己限制在一个狭窄的行为与结果里，失去自由，失去自发性，失去快乐。所以最终还是回到一句话：别想自己太多。
The advice we already know.
我们早已知道的建议。
There's a special type of pain in realizing that the advice that you need to hear right now is something that almost always you learned a long time ago, and that you're basically sort of the same person you were as you were 9. A lot of the time people ask questions like, what advice do you wish that you would give yourself 10 years ago, right? People ask themselves that question.
当你发现自己此刻最需要听到的建议，其实早在很久以前就已经学过时，会有一种特别的痛苦，因为基本上你和9岁时的自己其实还是差不多的人。你知道，人们常常会问这样的问题：如果回到10年前，你会给自己什么建议，对吧？人们会不断这样问自己。
Almost invariably, the advice that you would give yourself 10 years ago is still the advice that you need to hear today.
几乎总是如此，10年前你会给自己的建议，往往仍然是你今天需要听到的建议。
Absolutely. That's why I did that exercise of thinking back, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. What advice would I give myself? For me, it's just be less emotional. Don't take everything so seriously. Do the same things, but do them without all the emotional turbulence. And so that's the advice I'm giving myself going forward.
完全正确，所以我才会做这样的练习。回想10年、20年、30年前的自己，我会给什么建议？对我来说，就是少一点情绪化，不要把每件事都看得太严重，事情照做，但别再带着那么多情绪波动。所以，这就是我接下来要持续给自己的建议。
Yeah. It's funny how we need that distance to be able to be a little bit more objective, to have a little bit more perspective. And it's almost a little bit of a trick, right? Because typically when you do that, say, would you tell a friend that was going through this? Right. And then you try and turn the advice to the friend around onto yourself. But you always think, I'm not the friend. You're okay. 10 years ago. There's enough distance in that. You go, oh, I actually am still that person. There's just a single line between that.
是啊，很有趣的是，我们需要拉开一些距离，才能更客观、更有视角。这几乎像是一种小技巧，对吧？因为通常当你在想时，会说，如果朋友遇到这种情况，你会怎么建议他？然后你试着把给朋友的建议转到自己身上，但总会觉得我不是那个朋友。然而，如果是对10年前的自己说话，因为有足够的距离感，你会发现，我其实还是那个人，那之间只是一条细细的连线而已。
Understanding versus discipline.
理解 vs 纪律。
Yeah. Related to this story is I think understanding is way more important than discipline. Now, Jocko would have a fit. But on physical things discipline is important. If I want to build a good body, got to work out on a regular basis. But on mental things, I think understanding is way more important.
是的，跟这个故事相关，我认为理解远比纪律重要。当然 ，Jocko 会非常不同意。但你知道，在身体上的事情，纪律很重要。如果我想要打造一个好的身体，就必须规律运动。但在心理或思想层面上，我认为理解更为重要。
Once you see the truth of something, you cannot unsee it. All of us have had experiences where we've seen a behavior in a person and then it just changes what we think about that person. We no longer want to be friends with them. Or we deeply respect them if it was really good behavior that maybe was observed unintentionally.
一旦你真正看清某件事的真相，你就无法再看不见它。我们每个人都有过这样的经验， 看到某个人的某种行为，这就彻底改变了我们对他的看法，可能因此不再想和他做朋友，或者如果那是一个很好的行为，甚至因此对他深表敬佩，即使那个行为是无意间观察到的。
So when we really do see something clearly, it changes our behavior immediately, and that is far more efficient than trying to change your behavior through repetition.
所以，当我们真正清楚地看见某件事时，它会立刻改变我们的行为，而这比靠重复练习去改变行为要有效得多。
Could you give me an example?
你可以举个例子吗？
If you were, let's say that you have a friend and then that person turns out to be a thief, you see that person stealing something, you're done with them.
比如说，你有个朋友，但后来发现他是个小偷，你亲眼看到他偷东西，那么你跟他就彻底完了。
If you are, you know, the smoking lung cancer example is a good one, right? Someone close to you, or anytime someone close to you dies, or you even hear about someone dying, you hear about someone, what's the first thing you do? The first thing, assuming that you weren't that close to them, obviously your closeness is different, but if you weren't that close to them, but you know, you hear about someone in your extended social circle dying, you immediately start trying to distinguish yourself from them.
再比如说，吸烟导致肺癌就是一个好例子。当你身边的人去世了，或者你听到有人去世时，你第一个会做什么？假设你和他并不是很亲近，当然亲疏程度会影响感受，但如果他只是你社交圈中的某个人，你听到他过世后，会立刻开始区分自己和他。
You know, oh well, how old is this person? Were they a smoker? Did they have an issue? Do I have that issue? Right. You immediately start comparing, and what you're doing there is you're sort of just trying to see if there's an overlap here. But if you see the truth in something, if you're like, oh my god, this person was the same age as me and they died, and that's starting to happen at my age, where I'm starting to hear about extended circle people, just reminds you, time is really short.
你会想，这个人多大年纪？是不是吸烟？有什么健康问题？我有没有同样的问题？对吧？你会立刻开始比较，尝试找到差异。但如果真相是，天啊，这个人跟我同岁，却已经去世了。当这样的事发生在我的年纪，听到社交圈的人一个个出事，就会让我深刻意识到，时间真的很短暂。
There's a truth there. There's a truth there that you cannot unsee. Or, for example, I think, you into bodybuilding or something back when, I don't know.
这就是一个真相，一个你无法再忽视的真相。再比如说，我记得你以前好像玩健身或健美，我不太确定，
Just like bro lifting stuff.
就只是那种兄弟师举铁。
Okay, bro lifting. Yeah, right. But there probably was a point where you were being really aggro in the gym and you injured yourself.
好，兄弟师举铁，对，但大概有某个时候，你在健身房太冲，结果受伤了，
Many times.
很多次。
Right, and each one of those was a deep understanding of don't go beyond this point, right? There was a truth there. So again, when you see these things in such a way that you can't unsee them, that changes your behavior instantly, and I would argue that that introspection to find those truths is actually very useful.
对，而每一次受伤都让你深刻理解到不要超过这个界限，那就是一个真相。所以，当你看清这些事，再也无法忽视时，它会立刻改变你的行为。而我认为，这种内省去找到真相是非常有用的。
Is that a justification for more experimentation, exploration, experience in life? So they are trying to find serendipity because all of these experiences are going to teach you an inescapable lesson?
这是不是意味着我们需要更多的尝试、探索与生活经历？因为这些经历最终都会教会你无法逃避的课程。
You're going to do what you're going to do. I mean, your level of exploration, I think, is sort of up to you. But life is always throwing truth back at you. It's about whether you choose to see it, whether you choose to acknowledge it. Even if it's painful, truth is often painful, right? If it wasn't, we'd all be seeing truth all the time. Reality is always reflecting truth. That's all it is.
你会去做你自己要做的事。我的意思是， 探索的程度取决于你自己，但生命总会不断把真相丢回给你。关键在于你是否愿意去看见它，承认它，即便它很痛苦。真相往往是痛苦的，对吧？如果不是这样，我们早就随时看见真相了。现实就是一直在映照真相，仅此而已。
Why would you not have accessed it already?
那为什么你还没有早早意识到呢？
Wisdom must be discovered personally.
智慧必须由自己发现。
Exactly, you know, all the philosophy that's out there. For example, it's almost trite, like most people they look at philosophy like until they discover it for themselves. Because wisdom is the set of things that cannot be transmitted. If they could be transmitted, you know, we'd read the same 5 philosophy books. It would all be done. We'd all be wise.
没错，所有那些现存的哲学，比如说，看起来几乎都有点老生常谈。大多数人看哲学时，直到自己亲身体验，才会真正懂。因为智慧是一种无法传递的东西，如果能被传递，那我们读完同样的5本哲学书就都成圣人了。
You have to learn it for yourself. It has to be rediscovered for yourself in your own context. You have to have specific experiences that then allow you to generalize and see the truth in those things in such a way that you're not going to unsee them, but each person is going to see them in a different way. I can tell you that Socrates' story, and it's not going to resonate until there's something that other people desire that you realize you yourself don't want, and the moment that happens, then you'll see the truth in the general statement.
你必须自己学会，它必须在你自身的情境中被重新发现。你得经历某些具体事件，然后才能归纳出背后的真相，以至于再也无法忽视。但每个人看到的方式都不同。我可以告诉你苏格拉底的故事，但它不会引起你的共鸣。直到有一天，你亲身体验到，当别人追求的东西，你自己却发现不想要。那一刻，你才会真正看见那则普遍叙述中的真相。Unteachable lessons， 无法教会的课程。
I want to just read you a 2-minute essay that I wrote a couple of weeks ago. It's called Unteachable Lessons.
我想读一篇我几周前写的短文给你听，标题是无法教会的课程。
I've been thinking about the special category of lesson, one which you cannot discover without experiencing it firsthand. There is a certain subset of advice that for some reason we all refuse to learn through instruction. These are unteachable lessons.
我一直在思考一种特殊的课程，一种你不亲身经历就无法学会的课程。有些建议，出于某种原因，我们都拒绝透过教导来吸收，这些就是无法教会的课程。
No matter how arduous or costly or effortful it is going to be for us to find out ourselves, we'd prefer to disregard the mountains of warnings from our elders, songs, literature, historical catastrophes, public scandals, and instead think some version of, yea, that might be true for them, but not for me. We decide to learn the hard lessons the hard way over and over again.
不管要花多少代价，多么辛苦，我们总宁可无视长辈的劝告、文学与歌曲的警示、历史灾难、公共丑闻，反而会想，对他们可能是真的，但对我不是。于是我们一次次选择用最艰难的方式去学那些艰难的教训。
Unfortunately, they all seem to be the big things too. It's never new insights about how to put up level shelves or charmingly introduce yourself at a cocktail party. Instead, we spend most of our lives learning firsthand the most important lessons that the previous generations already warned us about.
不幸的是，这些课题往往都是人生中的大事，而不是什么如何装好水瓶的层架，或在派对上如何有魅力地自我介绍这类小技巧。相反，我们大部分人生都花在亲身学习那些前人早已警告过的重大课题。
Things like money won't make you happy, fame won't fix your self-worth, you don't love that pretty girl, she's just hot and difficult to get, nothing is as important as you think it is when you're thinking about it. You will regret working too much. Worrying is not improving your performance. All your fears are a waste of time. You should see your parents more. You'll be fine after the breakup, and be grateful that you did it. It's perfectly okay to cut toxic people out of your life.
例如，金钱不会带来幸福，名声不会修复你的自我价值。你不是真的爱那个漂亮女孩，她只是性感而难以得到。事情往往没有你当下想的那么重要。 你会后悔自己工作太多，担忧不会提升表现，你所有的恐惧都是浪费时间。你应该多去看看父母。分手之后你会好起来，甚至会感谢自己做了这个决定，把有毒的人。
And even reading this list back, I'm rolling my eyes at how fucking trite it is. These are all basic bitch, obvious insights that everybody has heard before. But if they're so basic, why does everyone so reliably fall prey to them throughout our lives? And if they're so obvious, why do people who have recently become famous or wealthy or lost a parent or gone through a breakup start to proclaim these facts with the renewed grandiose ceremony of someone who's just gone through religious revelation?
即使我现在重读这份清单，我都会翻白眼，觉得天啊，真是老掉牙的废话，这些都是人人早就听过的基本常识。但如果真这么基本，为什么我们一生中还是会一再掉入同样的陷阱？如果这么显而易见，为什么那些刚成名、刚致富、刚失去亲人或刚分手的人，会突然以宗教启示般的庄重姿态去宣告这些事实呢？
It's also a very contentious list of points to say on the internet. If you interview a billionaire who says that all of his money didn't make him happy, or a movie star who said that her fame felt like a prison, the internet will tear them apart for being ungrateful and out of touch. So not only do we refuse to learn these lessons, we even refuse to hear the message from those warning us about them.
而且，这些观点如果放到网络上，非常容易引发争议。如果你采访一位亿万富翁，他说金钱没让我幸福，或者一位电影明星说名声像是监狱，网络上的人会马上撕碎他们，说他们忘恩负义，脱离现实。所以我们不仅拒绝学习这些课题，甚至拒绝听取那些提醒我们的人所说的话。
And even more than that, I think for every one of these, if I consider a bit deeper, I can recall a time, including right now, where I convinced myself that I am the exception to the rule, that my particular mental makeup or life situation or historical wounds or dreams for the future render me immune to these lessons being applicable. No, no, no. My inner landscape would be solved by skirting around the most well-known wisdom of the ages. No, no, no. I can thread this needle properly. Watch me dance through the minefield and avoid all of the tripwires that everyone else kicks.
更进一步，我发现自己每遇到一个这样的课题时，心里总会冒出同样的念头，甚至现在也是。我觉得自己是规则的例外，我的心理特质、生活情境、历史伤痕、未来梦想，使我能免疫于这些教训。不是的，不是的。不是的，我的内在世界会因为避开那些古老的智慧而被解决。不是的，不是的，不是的，我能正确的穿针引线，看看我是怎么在雷区中起舞，避开所有别人都会踩到的陷阱。
The value of unteachable lessons.
无法教会课程的价值。
And then you kick one, and you share a knowing look, the kind that can only occur between two people who've been hurt in the exact same way, and a voice in the back of your mind will say, I told you so. That's unteachable lesson. It's a good essay.
然后你还是踩到了其中一个陷阱，你和另一个同样受过这种伤的人交换了一个心照不宣的眼神，脑海深处有个声音会说，我早就告诉你了，这就是无法教会的课程，这是一篇好文章。
I think one of the reasons why these lessons are unteachable is because they are too broad. They have to be applied in context. A number of the ones that you laid out contradict each other, like spend more time with your parents and don't work so hard. But at the same time, you do want to be successful, right? I think a lot of these lessons come from down on high, from, as you said, like the famous movie star or the billionaire saying, oh, you don't need money to be happy. It's like, well, okay, then give it up.
我认为这些课程之所以无法被教会，其中一个原因是它们太广泛，必须放在情境中才能应用。你列出的许多建议甚至互相矛盾，例如多陪伴父母与别太拼命工作，但同时你也想要成功，对吧？很多时候，这些教训来自高处，比如你说的那些名演员或亿万富翁宣称，金钱不能带来幸福，但听到的人会想，好啊，那你把钱捐出来啊。
Right? So in reality, I think many of these contradict each other. It's like if you went to school and you just studied philosophy for 4 years. You would not know how to live life because you wouldn't know which philosophical doctrine to apply in which circumstance. You have to actually live life, go through all of the issues to figure out what it is that you want, what's the context in which some of these things apply and some of them don't. Yes, you want to visit your parents more often, but you don't want to live with your parents and you don't want necessarily see them every day or every weekend depending on the parent. You might not get along with one of them, so I think it is highly contextual.
对吧？所以事实上，我认为很多建议是互相矛盾的。就像你去念哲学4年，毕业之后并不会知道怎么生活，因为你不会知道在什么情境下应该套用哪一套哲学。你必须真正去生活，经历各种问题，才能弄清楚自己想要的是什么，哪些建议在什么情境下适用，哪些不适用。是的，你会想要多去看父母。但你不会想和他们同住，也不见得想每天或每周都见面，这还取决于你和父母的关系。你可能和其中一位并不合得来，所以我认为这是高度情境化的。
That said, I would argue that once you figure it out for yourself, you can kind of carve these variations on these maxims that apply to you, and then you'll have a specific experience that helps you remember it and actually execute on it.
但我认为，一旦你自己搞清楚了，你就能把这些格言转化为属于自己的版本，并透过具体的经历记住它，进而真正的实践。
And you can also phrase it in a way where it's not trite anymore.
而且，你还能用一种不再老套的方式来表达它。
It's personal, so a lot of my maxims in those to self are carved in a way that they're modernized. They're saying something true, which might be trite if I didn't say it in a new way or in an interesting way that is more relevant to me today.
这是个人的，所以我很多给自己的座右铭都是以现代化的方式刻画的，他们所说的东西是真实的。如果换个方式说，可能会显得陈腔滥调，但当我用一种新的、有趣的、与今天的自己更相关的方式表达时，它就不会老套。
There was a Nobel Prize winner who said something to the effect of everything worth saying may have been said before, but given that nobody was listening, it must be said again.
有一位诺贝尔奖得主曾说过类似的话：凡是值得说的话，可能以前都已经有人说过了，但既然没有人真正听进去，那就必须再说一遍。
Yeah, it has to be said again. It has to be recontextualized for the modern age. Things do change, technology changes things, culture changes, people change.
没错，它必须一再被说出来，并重心放到现代语境中，因为事物会改变，科技会改变，文化会改变，人也会改变。
Wisdom versus appearing wise.
智慧 vs 看起来有智慧。
On that, I've heard you say, you talk about the difference between seeming wise and being wise. That you tried to appear smart as a kid.
关于这点，我听你说过，你谈到过看起来聪明和真正有智慧的差别。你小时候曾经努力让自己看起来聪明，
Still do.
现在还是。
Rote memorization, masquerading as insight and wisdom. I'd certainly feel that, you know, a lot of the show, for me, I think, has been, was and still is, a redemption arc from this decade of my life where I completely suppressed any intellectual curiosity. Like, okay, I'll be a professional party boy for 10 years, stand on the front door of a nightclub, and give out VIP wristbands, and have access to all of the pretty girls or the cool parties or whatever it might be.
死记硬背，假装成洞察与智慧。我确实觉得，对我来说，这个节目很大程度上是一个救赎之路，弥补我人生中那10年，我几乎完全压抑了自己的求知欲。那时候我心里想，好吧，那我就当10年的职业派对男孩，站在夜店门口发 VIP 手环，接触漂亮女孩，酷派对等等。
Seems like it worked out okay.
看起来还不错吗？
It did in some ways, but it was a good way to spend my 20s, but to sort of come back above water, 2 degrees. One of which was a master's, and then this, like, just shut down any of that learning. I did that while I was at uni. While I was at uni, I was running the events, so it was actually a decade and a half.
某些方面来说是的， 这确实是我度过20几岁的一种方式，但同时，在那段期间我也读了2个学位，其中一个是硕士，却几乎把所有真正的学习都搁置了。当时我还在大学时就已经在办活动了，所以实际上这样的状态持续了15年。
I think there was a big redemption arc within this show, and I constantly have to kind of wipe the slime off me of this sense that I need to prove myself. That's why it really resonates with me when you're memorizing things that indicate that you don't understand them, or that sort of rote memorization and regurgitation masquerading as wisdom, because people use fluency as a proxy for truthfulness and insights. They use the complexity of your language and your communication.
我觉得这个节目本身就是我的一个救赎旅程，我必须不断清除心里那种我要证明自己的黏腻感。这也是为什么当你谈到死记硬背假装成智慧时，我会很有共鸣，因为人们常常把流畅当成真实与洞见的代替品，他们把语言的复杂度与表达方式误当成智慧。
Yeah, there's a lot of jargon out there. I think it's the mark of a charlatan to explain a simple thing in a complex way, and so when you see people using very complicated language to explain simple things, they are either trying to impress you and obfuscate, or they don't understand it themselves.
是啊，外面有很多行话，我认为用复杂的方式去解释简单的事，就是江湖术士的特征。所以，当你看到有人用非常复杂的语言去解释简单的东西时，要不是他想要唬你，混淆视听，就是他自己根本不懂。Authenticity versus performance， 真诚 vs 表演。
But there's an allure in that though. This was one of the things I had to do when I went to therapy. I don't think I've talked about this before. I needed to turn off podcast Chris when I stepped into therapy because most of the time that I spend one-on-one in a deep conversation that's undistracted throughout the week, I trained myself over, you know, when I started doing it. 700 episodes now, 900 and whatever.
但那确实有它的吸引力。我在接受治疗时就必须面对这一点。我好像没谈过这个。我需要在进入治疗时关掉 Podcast Chris， 因为在1周里，大部分我1对1、深度且不受干扰的对话，都是录播客的训练。从我开始做，到现在已经录了700集、900集。
I knew what I could say to this therapist to just sort of veer off a little and create some nice story. Put a bow on it. Push it across the table. Watch your eyes light up a little bit, like a little grin or a self-deprecating joke or whatever. I'm like, you're not here, you're performing. You're doing the Chris Williamson thing with the sort of jazz hands.